Hey y'all, thanks for stopping by today. It's so good to see you. Whether it's the day this video was dropped or a year or 5 years from now, I see you. Has anyone told you I love you today? If so, awesome. If not, let me be the first. I love you. Being part of the LGBTQIA plus community can be celebrated in this safe place. Here in our Figuring It Out community, we're here for you. We're going to talk about coming out today. What is it? What does it mean? What does it look like? And what can we do to make it easier? First, let me say, coming out is a very, very personal experience. It takes courage and vulnerability to put yourself out there and reveal who you are. There's also no right or wrong way to do it. And there's no guide that can cover 100% of the circumstances or issues you may face. Reaching that level of authenticity can be hard. And yet when you reach the point where the alternative no longer makes sense, you can't keep hiding and not live your most authentic life. For some, it feels like a life and death choice, and it could very well be. There are tons of resources out here today providing guidance and suggestions, and I'll list a few in the show notes. Some we'll talk about today. So let's talk about it. What does coming out mean to you? Dictionary.com says to publicly announce a belief or preference that has kept one hidden, especially one's sexual preference. Wikipedia says it's a metaphor used to describe LGBT people, people's self-disclosure of their sexual orientation or one's gender identity. For those of us who grew up in conservative religious families, you were told you were bad or wrong for having these feelings. This cultural and societal stigma over the years has created internal conflict that is so difficult to reconcile. How people, anybody, interprets and understands this teaching wears on our hearts and our minds. As a child, you want to please the people around you. As you mature and grow, that innate desire to please others is reinforced when you behave according to a script that you didn't help write. You trusted those around you to set the stage for your future and thriving in the world. And then you discover what you learned or were maybe repeatedly told might not be the way life actually is. You reach a decision point where you get to decide to accept or reject the ideas and precepts you were taught. Your desire to please remains strong, so it's easier to hide until it isn't. Many I speak to experience a turning point, a paradigm shift, if you will, that releases them from the hiding. That's the point that you decide living authentically is more important than continuing to hide. For my friend Olivia, it was a death and loss of her mom, and she shared that with us last week. For me, it was heart bypass surgery. I'd been wrestling with the sense that I wasn't going to make it till 60. I shared that notion with my pastor at the time, and it was on my mind a lot leading up to a heart event later that year. I found myself in the ER with chest pain again. Yes, again, it was the 5th or 6th time over a number of years. And this time it was more serious and could have easily been fatal. Fortunately, it wasn't. But it was time for me at least to make some changes. It was time to quit hiding. I didn't know how much longer I had. None of us do. But I did know I wasn't waiting any longer. I prayed about it. Others prayed for me. And even though my church community, one that I had been so deeply involved in, didn't support me, I began taking the steps I knew I had to. Others who may not have grown up in a religious environment feel many of the same pressures, even when they come to grips with their sexual and gender identities. The notion that same-sex attractions and gender questioning is wrong is woven into the fabric of our culture and society. Over time, it's changing, thankfully. Yet you, as part of the LGBTQIA plus community, still feel the pressure and disapproval of many people around you. That disapproval and that pressure rains down shame on you and causes you to hide. That shame and disapproval keeps many locked in place and walking to the beat of someone else's drum. It creates a stranglehold on our existence, one that says we're bad and damaged and unworthy of joy and belonging. It's not true. You are different for sure, but different isn't bad. It's who you are. You're not broken or wrong. You're valued and precious and worthy of love and acceptance and, dare I say, joy. The first step to coming out is personally accepting who you are. It's difficult for some to accept your identity, even more so if you haven't settled it for yourself. See, some have known for a long time, and for others, the knowing has been a gradual realization. However, that happened for you. Are you owning your identity in the LGBTQIA plus community? Have you thought about what it means to be open and honest with yourself and with others? Many find it beneficial to process these thoughts with a trusted friend or a therapist. Whatever that looks like for you, it's important to find support. You certainly don't want to be blindsided by important considerations you hadn't thought about. See, finding and building communities of support along the way must be one of your most foundational considerations. Who around you will support you in your truth? Who can you rely on? Everyone's experiences are different, but one thing that's pretty consistent is allowing others to feel their feelings and process your news. It takes time for some, while some will instantly be thrilled for you. Others may be a little standoffish or outright negative and come around later on. Some may never accept you. Others may disown you and break relationship permanently. Some may want to save you from yourself. I'm not sure there's a reliable way to predict the response of others, but there's great value in being prepared for the potential responses. If you live at home, what will you do if your parents reject you? If you're in a relationship, married or not, what will you do? We all want to hope for the best outcome and should be honest with ourselves about the potential fallout. At the end of the day, we can't control someone else's response. So being prepared for the worst case is wise and prudent. I think it's really important to think about our audience's perspective too. You know, we're all up in our heads about our lives and our preferences and about, but what about the people closest to us? How will this news impact them? As someone who came out later in life, I had years of hiding to undo. Many find themselves in similar situations. Even if you knew at a young age and came to accept your sexual orientation or gender identity, you've lived with another identity for longer. Other people have experienced you in a different way than the authentic you. So when you break the news, it's perfectly reasonable to experience surprise and for the knowing to take time to process. The closer people are and the more intimately you know them, the longer it may take for them to accept you and understand where you're coming from. For those of us who can give people grace and space, the coming out process is a bit easier. If we're easily offended every time someone misgenders us or uses our birth name instead of our chosen name, it can block acceptance and prevent us from moving forward. This is obviously more geared toward the trans community. Trans people have a little tougher time because their physical characteristics, changing from male to female or female to male, involve more physically obvious changes. This can also apply to gender fluid and non-binary folks. At some point, though, there's no hiding your transition because it's more than the clothes you wear. Now, that's not to say that coming out as gay or lesbian or bi is any easier. It's just easier to hide if you choose to. Building a support system is so important, particularly in the early stages. Again, whether that's a therapist, friends, supportive relatives, an LGBTQIA plus support group, cultivating these relationships is critical to your mental health. Finding an affirming church is also a good place to build community. For those of us who grew up with religious backgrounds, this can be a little nerve-wracking and triggering, but for so many of us, our faith has always been an important part of our lives. So those communities do exist that can support you. Again, there are tons of resources available, and I'm happy to add some in the notes. Obviously, since I started talking about finding community, there's vulnerability in that. It means sharing your identity with another. Who you tell and how you tell them is 100% your business. No one has a right to know if you don't want them to. It's your choice as to who you do and who you don't allow to learn your truth. Depending on your circumstances, some you may decide need to know out of necessity. My doctor, for one, in my case, if I wanted to safely take hormones, I needed a doctor on my side willing to write a prescription. She needed to know what my desire and my goals were. In order to accomplish that, according to my insurance company, I needed a therapist to evaluate my circumstances and agree. Some providers require these steps as part of the WPATH Standards of Care, World Professional Association for Transgender Health. While there's debate about gatekeepers preventing people from doing as they please, WPATH has created a globally accepted standard of care based on research and real-life experiences of many people with the intent of keeping us all safe. Many insurance companies have adopted these standards of care and require them to provide coverage. See, one of the key things that therapists and psychologists consider is the support you have around you. Building a support network is that important. They know that there are going to be times where things are hard, and they want them to be sure that you know who you can turn to when that happens, because it will. Whether it's emotional support or spiritual support or just friendship, you need people around you. Just my opinion, but trying to do this alone is impractical and leads to complications that could be life-threatening. Okay, so you're building a support system, right? I sure hope so. Who are you going to tell, and how are you going to tell them? Sometimes making a list of all the people you know helps you prioritize who and when. I like to see things in front of me. So this was a helpful exercise for my situation. It was incredibly helpful when I came out of work because that took lots of planning and meetings with work groups at headquarters and work sites in different locations. Because I worked with a global automotive company at the time, and I worked directly with a variety of vendors, contractors, and employees, There was a great deal of thought and planning that went into the process. At the time, I was responsible for a team of about 40 people, some direct employees, some contractors. I asked that I be the one to tell my direct supervisor and the leadership team I worked with every day. The rest of the team was involved in a diversity workshop hosted by our HR team, along with about 150 people at the site through a series of meetings. Well, they found out while I was at an automotive conference halfway across the country. When I came back to work following that trip, I came back as Kelly. Now, prior to that, I had come out to my wife, my pastor, my children and grandchildren, my brother, my nephew. I came out to a few people at church and all those who were in the small group that we hosted at our home. Some I told in person, some I wrote letters to, depending on proximity and timing. For those I wrote letters to, I did so because I understood they would need time to process the change. Who you tell and how you tell them is completely up to you. You don't have to tell anyone if you don't want. It's what you are comfortable with. There's no right or wrong way. Follow your instincts and your heart. Now, I was fortunate in that I worked with a company that was progressive enough to understand the importance of diversity. The fact that I wasn't the first to go through it didn't hurt either. Almost every person I've ever spoken to about their coming out has told me the same thing. It was equal parts freeing and frightening at the same time. Euphoric because you no longer have to hide, and frightening because you have no idea how people are going to respond. Yeah, I second that. In my case, it was a mixed bag. Family did better than I thought, almost to the person. My church family all but deserted Patty and I. Our relationship with our small group changed dramatically as well. Some wrote me off and condemned me instantly. Others voiced support, and then we never heard from them again. One couple wanted to meet to learn and understand, but never followed through. One couple said they wanted to maintain relationship, but could not accept me as a woman and would continue to refer to me as my birth name and gender. When I mentioned my name was legally changed, they said they could accept that because in their view, my name was gender neutral, but they wouldn't accept me as a woman. And of course, they used their faith as justification for that choice. I said, no thanks. I was disappointed, yet I understand long-held views and beliefs don't change overnight. Really, I get it. I still love them dearly. And should I ever meet any of those folks on the street, I would be cordial and loving. You know, I watch and I listen as parents and children tell their stories, and so appreciate the ones where parents unconditionally support their families. For those who don't initially, I've seen them transform as they come to understand their child, like everyone else, is doing the best they can. And even though they might not agree with that child's choice, they're still family. There are some who place their values and beliefs above that of their family. That can happen, and we see evidence of it all the time. Particularly the number of LGBTQIA plus homeless children who are either thrown out of their family homes or the environment is so hostile, the kids don't feel like they can stay. Broken marriages are also more common, of course, than we want to think about. It's hard when after 10 or 15 or 20 years, you discover the person you're married to or in relationship with is someone that you don't know. There's a sense of grieving and loss that a partner must work through, and it's not easy. For us to understand the thought process and level of acceptance required is super, super important, because it's not just about you or me alone. It's about the relationship, the family as a unit, and about the couple in the relationship. Many go into a relationship with a preconceived idea of what the future is going to hold. And this kind of news definitely rocks the boat. Now, hopefully it won't capsize it and take everyone with it. For the transgender and questioning community, there may be health issues to address and name changes and licenses and social security card and bank records and deeds and titles and birth certificates. Oh my, passports, the list goes on. The list could include previous employer records, transcripts from high school and college, and even military records. Getting all that stuff updated is not an easy feat. Doable, but not so easy. Patty and I went so far as to have our wills and medical power of attorney updated. Since we're both a little older, we wanted to make sure everything was in order should something happen to either one of us. If you have any insight into project management, it's a great way to approach and cover all the details because there's a lot. And yes, sometimes it feels like you're herding cats. A little project management humor for you there. The result of coming out is felt in a variety of ways. I've covered a bunch of the relational issues and concerns that can come up, but no, this is by no means an exhaustive list. One thing I know personally, and from conversations with many in the community, family and church seem to have the greatest negative impact. We can't predict, nor can we control someone else's response to our news. Another reason to actively build a support network. Losing relationship with a loved one, a spouse, a parent, a child, close relative is hard when there's nothing you can do about it besides be patient and hope they come along. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. In the meantime, you've got a decision to make. Are you going to continually subject yourself to their ridicule and abuse, or are you going to walk away to protect yourself? It's really important to figure out where your boundaries are going to be. It's your choice, and it may boil down to the difference between suffering the ridicule and remaining stuck or flourishing in your new life. It's a choice that only you can make. Lots of people have an opinion about it. Yours is the only one that matters. I think most people across the country think about health, money, and careers a lot. As I talk to people and hear conversations happening almost daily, those three topics often come up. Health and healthcare are top of mind for many. If you're privileged to have an employer-sponsored healthcare plan, good for you. It doesn't always meet 100% of your needs, but it's a whole lot better than nothing. If you're transgender and you have a list of surgeries you want to get done, the coverage that plan provides holds even more significance. What will it cover? What won't be covered? How much will you have to pay out of pocket for each procedure? All relevant questions. And the answer is going to vary based on your employer and healthcare coverage plan you selected. As you go through the process, it's smart to begin asking questions. One thing I found is that the hospitals and surgical centers who provide these procedures usually have someone on staff that sorts out all the details with insurance companies. They handle the pre-approvals and all the details for you because, of course, they want to get paid. For those of you who don't have insurance, it can get pricey really fast. Not only do you have to come up with the cash, but you also have to plan time away from work and during recovery. More and more employer plans are fortunately covering gender confirmation surgeries, so that's good, but there's still a bunch you do not. I want to inject something here that's really important to consider too, I think. As a person in the workforce today, it's important to think about where you want to be in terms of your career. Of course, your education and background will have an impact, but no matter where you are today, you don't have to stay there. You have much more control over your future than you probably realized. If you're involved in unskilled labor, learn a skill. You need more education, go get it. Work in an oppressive environment where your diversity isn't appreciated or valued, find a different job with a different employer. The point is, you don't have to settle for second best, nor should you. I've seen so many people lost in shame and self-degradation because of what other people have said and the lies that they've believed, and they're stuck. They go through another day without hope or purpose because they just don't believe they have a choice. If that's you, I'm going to tell you straight, you absolutely have a choice. You don't have to settle. You are capable and powerful and able to achieve far more than you currently believe. It's going to take some work. It will take changing your thoughts about yourself and the opportunities in front of you. It will mean being in discomfort through at least part of the process, but you hold the key. Those tapes you grew up with that told you you're bad or wrong and unworthy are not accurate, and it's time to change the tape. When you have a good job and work with a great company, life does get better. Will it ever be perfect? Not likely. That's not the point. The point is, you have options. What dreams have you let go of? What excites you? Don't know what excites you? Don't know what you have a passion for? Let's talk about what you know you don't want for sure. So through the process of elimination, we can figure out what it is you do want. There are so many resources and aids out there to help you and help you get up and help you grow personally and professionally. Isn't it time to rediscover your passion? Or maybe find your passion for the first time? Be the authentic you the world needs? As a life coach, that's what I do. I help people live authentic lives in personal power and integrity. Don't keep sitting on the sidelines waiting for life to happen. Let's clear out the stuff and that's keeping you stuck. Let's figure out what it'll take to help you thrive and begin making it happen. That's what my Figuring It Out group coaching collective is all about. It's support for helping you gain perspective on your authentic self. It's helping figuring out how to live in abundance instead of hiding and shrinking into old habits and hiding from the possibility of what could be. It's time to build on the future that can be. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about a realistic approach to goal setting and honest achievement. I saw a video clip by a local physical trainer recently where he was emphasizing the point that true transformation does not happen overnight. It takes time and commitment and work. And as you put in the time, the results will come. Some people will see improvement faster than others, and that's okay. It's not a race. You aren't in competition on your journey. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. The only thing that matters is what you do with what you have. Because see, you have a thought. That thought creates a feeling inside of you. Those feelings that we have drive our actions. The actions you take produce the results you have. If you don't have the results you want, something has to change. If you're ready to begin taking action and changing the results you have, let's get on a call and talk about it. There's a place for you at the table. I'm happy to save you a seat. I love y'all. I'll talk to y'all soon. Be blessed. Again, thanks so much for coming by.